ultimate way to minimize racism towards Africans in the world is to fix the continent of Africa.
Just to put it bluntly, these are not refugees from Syria. These are refugees from neighboring Ukraine. I mean, that, quite frankly, is part of it. These are Christians, they're white, they're very similar to people, I mean, people who live in...
Me, I'm sorry, it's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, children being killed every day with Putin's missiles and his helicopters and his rockets.
So the Russian-Ukraine situation has once again brought to the surface how Africans are perceived and treated all over the world. We've seen videos of Africans trying to leave the war zone because bombs and missiles and machine guns are raining down on them, but they get to the borders between Ukraine and Poland and they are refused entry into Poland. They are treated inhumanely. Some are assaulted, some are left behind, the trains left. It's not the first time that this is happening. The other time, during the time of COVID-19 pandemic in China, you had Africans blamed for the pandemic. You had the Chinese people blaming Africans and discriminating against Africans for the pandemic. The same thing happened in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia was panicking because of the COVID-19 pandemic, whatever, trying to contain the spread. So they decided to deport a bunch of Africans. They put about, I can't remember if it was 300 or 3,000 Eritreans and Ethiopians on cargo planes. Put them on cargo planes from Saudi Arabia and ship them back to Africa like they are animals. So it's not a surprise that Africans are always at the receiving end of racism. But we crying and complaining and pointing it out all the time has also not yielded any results. For decades we've been doing this. What result has it led to? Nothing, for the most part. I mean, there are some improvements. You go to some parts of the world and you realize that race relations has improved. For example, in the United States, they started off with the civil rights movement in the 40s, 50s, 60s. It has yielded some results today, but there is still a huge form of racism in the United States. At the end of the day, racism is not going to go away. It's going to be there forever. It's just human nature. The situation that happened in Ukraine, I'm not going to 100% call it racism because this is a time of war. And it's a time when people are trying to protect themselves. They are trying to, look after themselves first before other people. And it's just human nature. It's racism, but it's still human nature. And that should be enough reason for us as African people to find a way to start unifying and treating ourselves better. I'll tell you guys the truth. The ultimate way to minimize racism towards Africans in the world is to fix the continent of Africa. That is the bottom line. When we fix the continent of Africa and an average African person, citizen, has a better life, has a standard of living that has improved, is not being dehumanized in his own country, is not treated like a second-class citizen in his own country, then we stand a chance at being respected. Look at China. That is the perfect example. Back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, China wasn't respected. Nobody gave a damn about China. They would make fun of the Chinese in the West, in the United States, United Kingdom, in Europe. The Chinese were not respected. But fast forward today, 2022, now that China is one of the superpowers of the world, everybody puts respect on the name of China. I mean, there are times here and there you hear about discrimination against the Asian community. For example, in the US, after the pandemic broke out, the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of Americans decided that, oh, these Chinese people are responsible, so let's discriminate against them. But deep down in their hearts, the people discriminating against the Chinese, they still have some sort of respect for the Chinese because they know that China is a superpower. That's a country where an average citizen is not dehumanized. Even if they are dehumanized, it's not the same way that we on the continent of Africa are dehumanized. How do we treat ourselves? You find African politicians treating African citizens like slaves. You go to Uganda, they have a president that has been there for 35 years. Throughout his 35 years, poverty increased in the country, the standard of living of the people dropped, and human rights disappeared. Now he's trying to replace himself with his son to continue the legacy of dehumanization of the people. Same thing is happening across many African countries. Nigeria, the biggest African country, the country with the largest number of African people in the world, is a country where we don't have human rights. You are dehumanized on a daily basis by the government. The government is the actual citizens, while the people are second-class citizens. So with that dynamic, that you're not respected by your own people, how do you expect foreigners to respect you? And that's why the bottom line is, when we can fix the continent of Africa, starting off by getting rid of the corrupt politicians, the corrupt leaders that have sold us out continuously, collaborated with imperialists from America, Asia, Europe, to keep us, the people, enslaved, while they in power continue to be like kings, doing nothing, for doing absolutely nothing. When we can get rid of these criminals that call themselves leaders, we've taken a step forward towards minimizing racism. And then the next step will be actually developing the continent and making us more self-reliant, less dependent on the rest of the world for everything. We can't even feed ourselves, bro. In order for us to feed ourselves, we have to go buy agricultural equipment from China, because that's the only way you can feed millions of people. You need to use mechanized agriculture. You can't just get it done by hoes and cutlasses and rakes in the farms. You actually need tractors. Do we manufacture tractors? No. We have to go get that shit from China, the United States, and Europe. Can we defend ourselves? No, we can't. We need American guns, European guns, and Chinese guns to defend ourselves against locally grown terrorists. That's the case in Nigeria and many other countries, Mozambique, Somalia, even Kenya to a large extent. That is the exact story that's our story, the African story. So nobody really respects us because we are reliant upon them. But do we have the capacity to be self-sustainable? Yes, we do. Why can't we become self-sustainable? Terrible leadership for decades. So we can keep crying and complaining about racism. It's not going to go away until we fix the continent of Africa. And I'll end this up by saying, if Russia decides to invade the giant of Africa, Nigeria, today, what do you think Nigeria is going to do? Or any other African country, as a matter of fact. If Russia or China or anybody else decides to invade any country in Africa, guess what? We are going to go back to another European country or America to rescue us. That tells you why we are not respected around the world. So until we are able to fix the continent of Africa, we're going to remain in this position.